ladies, MBs and gents. This video is a response to a recent video by KT Blackadder, but also a general commentary on a recent incident, i.e. someone being given a prison sentence for certain media content they chose to create and share publicly. As I've mentioned in previous videos and elsewhere, there is a huge subculture of people on the internet who don't understand free speech, often arguing that Steve Shives blocking them is a free speech issue, or blog sites not wanting to hire Thunderfoot is a free speech issue, etc, etc. However, what has happened recently is a free speech issue because the person in question has received consequences that have been enforced by the state, who by virtue of being the state wield undue power and influence over the lives of ordinary citizens. Personally, given as we see violations of the various UK laws such as the Malicious Communications Act 1988 or the Racial and Religious Hatred Act 2006 and such similar all the time, I prefer we see more consistent and more measured consequences meted out for these violations, rather than ignoring one violation after another, and then suddenly meting out very severe consequences to one violator of such laws. Part of my broader worldview is that I generally don't approve of incarceration unless it's absolutely necessary for the physical safety of other people in society and or the person themselves. What I'd prefer is something similar to the driver safety awareness courses people get sent on if they're found culpable in road traffic incidents. I would support the idea of people being sent on media law awareness courses and or something similar to sensitivity training, as we see in workplaces when employees are found to be engaging in bigoted behaviour in the workplace. What you'll note here is that I'm not in favour of this sort of behaviour being consequence free as such. I would not be willing to back a campaign that sought to do away with the UK's hate speech laws. I am in favour of hate speech laws for the same reason I'm in favour of libel laws, slander laws, defamation laws and incitement laws. Just as I don't think freedom of speech should extend to me being able to spread unsubstantiated and damaging rumours about individuals, which could very likely lead to said individuals experiencing discrimination or even violence, I don't think freedom of speech should extend to me being able to spread substantiated and damaging rumours about whole groups of people, such as ethnic minorities and gender and sexual minorities. For example, just as it shouldn't be a consequence-free scenario for me to spread an unsubstantiated rumour about an individual person being a sex offender, it shouldn't be a consequence-free scenario for me to spread a rumour about a gender and sexual minority group being disproportionately sex offenders. The same goes for spreading rumours that certain ethnic minorities are genetically predisposed towards greed, violence, or general criminal behaviour. If we understand why libel, slander, defamation and incitement should not be covered by free speech, then we understand why hate speech shouldn't be either. If you want to know why the law is particularly sensitive about Nazism, even when it doesn't appear to be something that is directly explicitly being advocated, it has to do with both the fundamental nature of Nazism and its history. Most obviously, we have actually seen Nazism in action. It isn't some hypothetical idea we have to imagine the consequences of, we've seen it. More than that though, we have to understand that Nazis aren't just people who might commit hate speech. Their entire worldview is fundamentally built upon and was successfully perpetuated through hate speech. Indeed, the Nazi Party were able to gain the sympathies of the electorate by spreading propaganda as to the supposedly insidious and dangerous nature of Jewish people and other groups. People who claim words can never hurt you would do well to read up on this. Nazism isn't just an idea that is bad if it gets taken to extremes. Nazism is the word we use for a specific idea, that is certain people being genetically inferior, that has been taken to its extremes. So my position is not that we should do away with hate speech laws, rather my position is that we should perhaps improve them. I agree with Amnesty International when they say governments have an obligation to prohibit hate speech and incitement, and restrictions can be justified if they protect specific public interest or the rights and reputations of others. Any restrictions on freedom of speech and freedom of expression must be set out in laws that must in turn be clear and concise so everyone can understand them. I think it's this last bit where the problem lies. The law perhaps isn't quite clear and concise, so I'd certainly be open to it being made more clear and concise. As I said earlier, meting out consequences for breaking the law more consistently and proportionally. However, KT has suggested that Sargon of Akkad, or Carl of Swindon as he is more accurately known, would be a good candidate for leading the charge for such legal reform. To this I have to say no, for the simple reason that Karl is someone with a history of being an opponent of free speech. To present some evidence for this, Karl has argued that feminism should be officially classified as a mental illness. As such, if he were to get his way, someone such as myself could well find themselves hurled into a padded cell for expressing support for feminism. Because I don't want to be hurled into a padded cell, I would either have to not express support for feminism or would have to express it at illegal meetings. This is a very similar policy to a policy in Nazi Germany, where political opponents of the Nazis were incarcerated on the grounds that they must be mentally ill. Secondly, Karl advocated that his American subscribers should vote for Donald Trump. Donald Trump is a huge opponent of free speech. Since he got into office, we've seen journalists getting arrested simply for trying to do their job and report on the protest at Trump's inauguration, a woman arrested and facing a year in prison for laughing at the claim that Jeff Sessions treats all Americans equally under the law, the EPA being ordered to delete all information relating to climate change from the government's website, the USDA being ordered to delete all information about animal mistreatment from the government's website, imposing a global gag rule which legally prohibits medical professionals from recommending abortion services, government employee who used the dissent channel being threatened with legal action by the Trump administration, major news outlets not only being banned from attending White House press briefings, but actually being threatened with legal action for reporting negatively on Trump. Trump threatening to destroy the career of a senator who disagreed with Trump's policy of guilty until proven innocent, among other things, and making good on that threat. Trump was pretty clear that he was going to place limits on the behaviour of the press before he was elected, that even if that weren't enough of a warning, you'd think someone who supported free speech would surely realise their mistake afterwards and apologise and try to make amends, but that hasn't been the case. Worse still, Karl perpetuates misinformation about free speech.
Free speech is not the number of words in your lexicon. It is whether you are able to express political ideas without ramification. Freedom of speech is the right to political speech without suffering political consequences. It does not matter where those consequences originate from, and it is low to attempt to weasel out of responsibility for infringing on someone's rights to free political expression under the guise of, well, it's only censorship when the government does it.
I don't think some people realise just how insidious this definition of free speech is. It's a smoke and mirrors trick. If free speech includes immunity from political consequences, then what Karl wants is to be able to express his political beliefs, but not have people express opposing political beliefs in retort. If they did, they'd be making him experience political consequences. This definition of free speech means Karl and those he agrees with get free speech and the rest of us don't. I am certainly not willing to entrust the future of my own or anyone else's human rights to such an individual. So what it would take for me to support a campaign to change free speech laws in the UK would be someone else being in charge of said campaign. Someone who understands what free speech is, including the understanding that it necessitates restrictions and that it does not equate to freedom from consequence, that it must be for everybody, and someone who does not have a track record of opposing and perpetuating misinformation about free speech. I should also add another problem you're likely to encounter when trying to pressure MPs by saying this will affect how you vote is that both the major political parties in the UK are currently locked in a fierce battle over who is the least anti-Semitic. As such, neither is particularly likely to want to be seen to be supporting anti-Semitism, even if that isn't actually what they'd be doing. The fact that they might appear to be doing such a thing could cost them a lot more votes than it might gain. One thing I did agree with KT about was his idea that we take the law out of the hands of the state and instead put it into the hands of the public via non-partisan organisations that agree to pressure the state when it violates our human rights. Because although I expressed agreement with Amnesty International earlier, I would go a stage further and push not simply for a society where governments have laws protecting our free speech and prohibiting hate speech, but rather for a society of no government. Instead, a network of publicly controlled organisations, such as the one KT mentioned in his video. This is actually what I outlined in my video, How Our Tube Could Work, though as we all saw that fell largely on deaf ears. Whatever happens in the meantime, I'd suggest people try a bit harder to stay on the correct side of the law, at least until such time as you have some success in changing it. The internet is not some sort of safe zone where laws don't apply. I've made a couple of videos in the past outlining some of the ways in which a lot of right-wing YouTubers could be deemed to be breaking the law, which I shall link in the description. Thanks for watching. Comments remain open, so long as comments remain civil and constructive.
Spikor, grab my hand.
Dad, I will fall.
Come on, try. I got you. Now hold on. Here we go. Okay, Spikor, you're all right.
Yes, Spikor is all right. And now Spikor will return the favor.
Dad! I knew I was going to regret this.